2018, 2019, there was another source of significant demand, which I've written about and I've spoken about, which was people who were wanting to buy cryptocurrencies to participate in MLM and Ponzi schemes.
So, can you talk a little bit about the dynamics of how crypto feeds into those multi-level marketing and Ponzi schemes in places like Cuba?
Yeah, so that's this is it's a very very interesting question because you kind of saw something similar, in the 1990s in Eastern Europe when there's the fall of the Berlin Wall, and all of a sudden all these countries that were there's no market economy, there's no business. It's just they get flooded with all these opportunities. New Western companies, everything looks amazing, new technology, and there is no sort of societal antibody towards Ponzi schemes or MLM schemes, right? You had in Romania, I think, Cass, you wrote about the Caritas Ponzi, which was between $1 and $5 billion worth of a Ponzi scheme. There was a small civil war in Albania after a Ponzi scheme blew up. And yeah, I mean, it's
MMM
just, it's the fact.
MMM was the other one.
Sorry.
MMM was the other one. That's a Russian Ponzi scheme that appeared after the fall of the Berlin Wall and went on for several years. There's like a second version that's crypto based now as well. But yeah, these certain places that are ripe for Ponzi schemes. Like obviously we have our fair share of scams in Europe and in the United States of America, Canada, like the Western world. We definitely have that. But I would suggest that there's places where when you're introduced to new capital flowing in and you don't understand how certain concepts work because it's been so long since you even have had to interact with like free market economy, that you just think, like, especially in the case of Caritas, I think it was a lot of like, well, this is just how capitalism works, right? Like, we just make money. So I think that at least that's what I'm kind of hearing here, is that that's a bit of the issue in these places.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. In fact, there's this other Ponzi scheme, MLM scheme called Forsage, which is a sort of Ethereum smart contract based Ponzi scheme. Where basically it's an MLM scheme, right? You get recruited and then you get incentivized to recruit more people, etc. And there's a paper that came out recently that was super interesting for two reasons. First of all, they actually did the sort of chain analysis, and they proved that, yeah, I mean, it's obvious to us, but like, okay, 88% of users lost money in this. Secondly, they actually did some pretty clever analysis to figure out where the users were actually from, people that participated in this. And they found that it was overwhelmingly, in countries like Nigeria, Indonesia, India, places where, first of all, they might not be as familiar with this sort of thing. It's hard to differentiate technology from an outright scam. And there's less economic opportunity sometimes for people. So they decide to participate in these things. There were two very big ones in Cuba back when I was, I got to be there. One of them was called Carrot Bars, which was run by a German former vacuum cleaner salesman, who eventually got, I think, some charges pressed against him. I don't know if he ever went to jail. But basically, they had events in Miami and Amsterdam, etc., and they managed to recruit a very, very, wide audience of Cubans, and they had their own token, which, as you can guess, it went to zero, and a lot of people lost their money. But the bigger one, and this is one that kind of blew my mind, is one that was called trust investing, which was a very, very simple crypto Ponzi scheme in the sense of you deposit us money, we're going to do magic arbitrage to give you 10% yields. And they tried to do this in perpetuity. And the Cuban authorities, despite Cuba being a police state, only moved against one of the local organizers in April of 2021. So for a very, very long time, this guy was operating it with impunity, Only after they started having issues, they actually moved to arrest him, and then they actually let him go a little bit. So I'm not sure what's going on there. But the reason why I bring this one up is because it was very, very devastating in Cuba. Tens of thousands of people who didn't have that much money. Keep in mind, the average salary in Cuba is something like $20, $30 if you work for a state company a month. They didn't have that much money, but they were putting all their savings into this scam. And, something like 44% of all the trust investing users were based in Cuba, with the rest around, wherever the Cuban diaspora was. So one of the big novelties of cryptocurrency is that these Ponzi scheme operators can tap into so-called virgin markets, right? And even if Cubans don't have that much money, if you can get 70,000 of them to participate in your scam, you're probably already doing quite well, right? And this whole OneCoin thing that came out a few years ago, that was also going around developing countries as well.
And in a country as small as Cuba, I mean, there's only like 11 million people there. If it affects 50,000, 70,000, 100,000 people, like, one of these people, if you live there, for sure. So yeah, that's a lot. That's crazy.